Always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for making time. On the show this week, we discuss education, social innovation, and responsibility. Our guest, Sanda Ojiambo, who heads the Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundations. We get your views on the issues, and we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gichuru. This week on Africa Leadership Dialogues, we host Sanda Ojiambo. She's the head of corporate responsibility at Safaricom Limited, and she heads the Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundations. The foundations seek to make positive contributions to communities in Kenya. Sanda is a development practitioner with a master's degree in development economics and public policy analysis. She has completed training in strategic management, program development, and development planning. Sanda previously worked as the director of programs at the Africa Regional Office of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, where she provided technical and strategic leadership for the development and implementation of reproductive health in over 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. She's also worked with CARE International, UNDP Somalia, and Planned Parenthood Federation of America International, where she managed a range of development projects. Let's get straight to her views on the issues. Thank you so much, Sanda, for making time to be with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
Thank you. So a lot is going on across the continent, and a few years ago we were excited as a continent to see the Africa Leadership Academy launch in South Africa. We've seen universities trying to reframe the way they think, several of them on the continent, and now the M-Pesa Foundation Academy is launching. Tell us about the Academy. What does it offer to young Kenyans?
Right. So the M-Pesa Foundation Academy is currently a project of the M-Pesa Foundation. And it's really based on about 10 years of work with schools around Kenya. And through our foundations at Safaricom, we realized that whereas we could go ahead and continue to make piecemeal investments in schools, we learned lessons that compelled us to do something bigger and braver, which was, why don't we bring all the lessons we've learned together and shape the school that we think will provide the thinkers, the doers, and the leaders for future Kenya and for future Africa. And that really is how the M-Pesa Foundation Academy was born.
Who's going to get into the academy? How are you going to select the students who come in? Do they pay school fees? Are they funded? What's the plan?
Right. So the school is, first of all, let me say it's a mixed boarding high school. So we are going to take students who are in Form 1 to Form 4. We're going to follow the Kenyan curriculum, that is the KCSE curriculum. And we will focus in the initial at least 5 years on non-fee paying children. So we'll take in kids who are bright, talented, but economically disadvantaged, because we feel there's so many kids out there who don't really have the opportunity to maximize their full potential.
So the foundation starts in January 2016. I imagine the call for possible students will be happening soon?
Soon. We actually will get the application forms out in July.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you know somebody who's smart, who maybe is from a family or a community that is struggling to pay the school fees, and they have a lot, great possibilities, please think about applying to the Foundation Academy. Now, the foundation, the Safaricom Foundation itself does a lot of things. The M-Pesa Foundation as well. What's the difference between the two? Some people might ask. Yeah.
So first, let me say I'm really humbled and honored to lead the two foundations. Essentially, they both do contribute to Kenya's development agenda, and that's really the thing. You know, as a responsible corporate, we do know it's important for us to contribute to Kenya's issues in health, in education, in empowerment. The difference between the two really is that the M-Pesa Foundation does, I'll say, larger scale projects at a different level. So Safaricom Foundation has a 10-year history, has probably implemented about 1,000 projects around the country, you know, from very small community-based projects to much larger ones, whereas the M-Pesa Foundation simply does large regional or county-based projects. So we'll take on the academy, but we've also done significant investments around Starehe Girls Center. We are currently implementing a very large-scale county-wide maternal health project in Samburu.
You know, it's fascinating seeing the amount of work, and I personally have done a lot with the foundation,
right.
Engaging on Kenyans for Kenya and really transforming the way we as Kenyans think of ourselves, seeing ourselves as partners in the solution,
right.
rather than sitting back and waiting for someone to solve a problem. And I always say thank you to everybody who contributed to save lives during that time, the drought of the Horn of Africa. We're also working on SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's been lots of work going on. Why all this effort? And I've asked this question to Bob Collymore as well. Why is Safaricom so focused on this?
I think it stems to who we are. We believe firmly that we're a responsible corporate. And, you know, to be that, you just need to be involved in the country's development agenda, you know, and it stems not only from what we do through our foundations, but through our business as well. So, for example, when you look at a lot of our products, we also need to look at them from a development focus. So when you're looking at data and access to the internet, it's not just consumers like you and I at home, but it's really how we're providing products and services that make sense for Kenyans. So we have, you know, agricultural information services. We have education learning portals. We are using our technology and our platform to deliver better maternal child health services. So it's not purely from a foundation perspective, but I think as a business, you know, and which is why we say that our mission is to transform lives. It's really about how can we transform lives of Kenyans in many ways above and beyond simply communication.
A lot of corporates haven't got there in terms of their thinking. I'm going to come back to that issue of corporate responsibility and the private sector's role in development in Africa. But first, Sanda, you've worked in the development field for many years. And before you came into Safaricom, you had worked in Somalia. You have an amazing profile. When you look at Africa today, are you hopeful or are you concerned? What's your feeling?
Right. You know, I'd probably say I'm a mix of both, but I'm largely hopeful. And the reason I say this is that I believe there's a resurgence of locally driven innovation and a drive to really develop solutions that make sense for situations, for communities, and for countries. I mean, if you just look at the technology sector, I mean, you know, certain countries in Africa are way at the top in terms of innovation, in terms of community development solutions. I think if you also look at the way we've undergone, you know, political transformation, economic growth, and things like that. So I think that there's, you know, resurgence and solutions that are coming together and providing, for me, a platform of hope. But then again, I think perhaps in terms of issues such as resilience, you know, from time to time we still have droughts. You have, you know, natural disaster that perhaps we haven't quite figured out how to best respond to. And those are some of the issues that, for me, wipe out pockets of progress. But I do believe in general, and if I can bring it home to here, Kenya, I do believe that really there's lots of optimism. I mean, we have young people who are driving innovation forward. We have communities finding great sustainable solutions for a lot of our challenges around health, around education, around environmental conservation. And I think we have a government that is really firmly committed to bringing together the best of the private sector, of public sector, and, you know, working together in harmony.
As I mentioned, we need to talk about the private sector and the role of private sector in development. And I think more and more businesses are beginning to realize to be sustainable, they have to be doing some good in society. You know, development is critical, and for them to thrive, they need to contribute to development. But some might be sitting back wondering, how do we engage with government? It's so difficult. What lessons have you learned in engaging with government and other development partners as well, in working together to make a difference?
I think first I'd say nobody is too small or too big to partner. From my perspective, I think there's lots of great solutions around the table. What we need to do better is partner better. And sometimes partnerships start off small. It's kind of like dating. You sort of have the first date and it doesn't work out, or you figure out what you need to tweak and how you need to do it differently. But I think that partnership building is going to be critical for whatever we do going forward. Very few companies have, or private sector actors will have the solutions that we're looking for, especially to address Kenya's development agenda. And I can give you, you know, a couple of examples. I talked earlier about using our technology platform in maternal and child health. There you bring together the Ministry of Health. You bring together a consortium of NGOs, you know, AMREF, World Vision. You bring together a research partner like Aga Khan University. And then you throw in Safaricom in the midst of it because we're the technology partner. And you see, it's probably a very unlikely partnership, but together we're actually making a very big impact in terms of maternal and child health in the country. So people also need to think about how to partner differently. It's not your traditional partners that are delivering development solutions anymore either.
Wow, that's fascinating. So don't be scared to reach out. You're not too small. No one is too small. If you have something to offer, get on the table. Get on the table. When you look at young people in Africa today, and generally, I think there's a lot of despair in many ways when we look at our leadership. Politics is almost a dirty word for many people. We get so disappointed. There's a feeling that, you know, there's actually no will to change things. When you engage with government, what do you think? Is there a will to make a difference or not?
You know, from the experiences that I've had around government partnerships, there is definitely a will. I think there's three key things that stand out for me, and it's almost like an invitation to partner. So first is the Sustainable Development Goals. I think, you know, the way that they've been articulated and what has been said about private sector partnership is very clear. These are goals that will take shape later on in the year, and it's very clear what the role of private sector can and should be. Again, if you look at our government right now, there's a very big push on public-private partnership. It can't be understated. I think a lot of key government initiatives, a lot of key development initiatives do have private sector involvement. And I think that's also a very clear statement about direction. And even if you look back at Vision 2030, I think one of the key lessons learned in the midterm review was that we needed more corporate sector participation. So the time is right. And as I said, I don't think any private company or corporate citizen is too large or too small. Everybody can play a role.
Wow, that's amazing. So looking at it now from a citizen's point of view, what kind of a citizenry do we need to actually stand up and play the role?
I'd say that you probably want a citizenry who can feel that they are involved, that they are valued, and that their inputs are felt. You know, to some extent, that's why for me, you know, the devolved structure where you can take action very much, you know, at the grassroots is critical. So, you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, citizens grouping together to implement projects, you know, managing projects, managing community projects together, being held together by an accountability framework that is close to home, I think is really critical. And if you can do that, then I think it gives you a chance to participate, you know, at your community level. I look at things, and you earlier talked about Kenyans for Kenya. I mean, for me, that was a classic example of how, by reducing a barrier to entry or to participation in an initiative, hundreds of thousands of Kenyans got to be able to participate. I mean, you saw some of those people, you know, a Mama Mboga who would give up her daily takings and take them to the M-Pesa shop and say, you know, put this into Kenyans for Kenya. You know, the policeman, remember the policeman who gave up his salary, you know, for the month. Kids who would come up to us, you know, at lunchtime and say, here's my pocket money I've saved. And I think if citizens are given a platform where they can communicate and participate, but with an accountability framework that makes sense, then it's a great way to get involved.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
We keep saying that it's not enough to be employed or to wait for employment. We need to create jobs. So this is such a dynamic environment, and for the generation of our parents who came out and there was a public service job or a private sector job waiting for them, completely different. What kind of young people do we need? What traits must they have?
And, you know, this is exactly what the M-Pesa Foundation Academy aims to solve. So what we've done is said, who is that person that will graduate from this school 5 years down the line? And what will their employer or their business environment expect from them, or their community environment indeed? And in line with that, what we've decided to do is take the KCSE curriculum, but put in all other elements that we think will develop that citizen for the future. It's not about education for today, it's really about education for 5 years down the line. And also just remember that our Kenyan citizens and students here are competing on a global platform. It's not just, you know, kids between kids locally. It's, can I get this job against someone who's sitting in India, probably with great programming or coding skills? And so there's things that have struck us as important. First of all, a bit more of an entrepreneurial sense. And by this, we don't mean that everyone will go out and run business, but everybody will know how to run business, you know. We've looked at things like, you know, the arts, the sports, and the music. Those are key factors in terms of, you know, preserving culture, telling a heritage story, but also they're actually key, you know, business elements. There's lots of successful artists, sports people, musicians. Add on to that elements around their management as well. We've also looked at other things such as leadership, and looking at leadership above and beyond political leadership or commercial leadership. What does it just mean to be a leader? Because everybody is a leader in their own domain. And, you know, our take is that if we start inculcating all of those values and lessons as early as possible, so as early as Form 1, what you'll get is a child who has great grades, but they're also world ready. Yeah? They have a world view, they're able to have a world conversation, they're aware of current affairs, they know how to make great decisions, they're confident, they can present, and they can hold their own on the global stage because it really is a competitive world.
A child who's world ready, I love that. I know it's powerful. I want to come back to your story now, Sanda. And you were based in Somalia for quite a while.
It was just 5 years.
5 years is a long, 5 years in Somalia is a long time.
It's a long time, yeah.
And especially the fact that it was during the very difficult phase, though it's still going through a transition. When you look at Africa today, what's notable for you in terms of progress or development?
Right. I'd probably say that there's a lot more economic development that's gone on in a couple of countries. So I feel that, and you know, the statistics are one thing, but I judge this by what you see when you drive through cities. So, you know, for me, the more people can see out selling, trading, more shops, more development, diversity of products, especially if they're homegrown and local, for me it shows that something is happening, something is sprouting. So it may not necessarily be large-scale trade, but it means that at least at the grassroots, there's more opportunity. For me, that is one of the key things that I always look out for, you know, how busy are the streets, how bustling are the streets, and what does that mean in terms of economic development per se? I mean, one factor that you definitely can't ignore across the continent is just political awareness. I think a lot more people are engaged in politics. They are more savvy about their rights, constitutional rights, their civil rights, etc. And it's just, there's a general sense of awareness and optimism in my part.
Right, that's a good thing. When you look at Somalia today, do you watch the country? Do you feel a connection at all?
I do, and I always say I do want to go back. I'm not sure to do what, but I was fortunate in my 5 years to get to work in all areas of the country. I know that, you know, there's certain, you know, ways that the country is viewed and classified, but I did work in the south, I worked in the northwest, and I worked in the northeast, so I pretty much got a good sense of Somalia and all of its challenges while I was there.
Going by what you've learned about Africa over the past few years, the work you do today, and everything that's happening around us, where do you see Africa in the next 10 years?
That's a tough one to move the continent along all in one. There's some key things that I see happening. I see the role of technology playing a really big, let me say, you know, acting as a big leapfrog towards going forward. You know, if you look at just the way the mobile industry is in Kenya right now, we have leapfrogged a lot of ways in which people access the internet and access information in other parts of the world. So I see technology playing a key role in how the country goes forward. And for me, it's not purely around communication. It's around technology and its application to health, to education, to economic empowerment, and to agriculture. So that for me is a key driver. Where we'll be in the next 5 to 10 years.
We'll come back to the academy now as we start to wind up and the doors open in January. What's your hope for those students? What do you hope to see? This has almost been a baby for you. What is your hope for January?
I hope to see 94 students. We're taking 2 students from each of the counties. 94 students who are filled with optimism that this journey, because we're really embarking on this journey together, is going to be one where for them they will learn, they will experiment, they will deliver on a KCSE curriculum as a platform, but they'll come out, and I'll use that phrase again, world ready.
Right.
Yeah? Students who are excited about the opportunity. I think students who are going to be inquisitive about education. We don't see enough of that. Students who are going to challenge education as well. We wanted them to be able to say, well, look, you know, you can look at this differently. You can do this differently. All of these are things that we want to use to reflect on year and improve the offering that we have for the academy as well. I want students who will be able to connect with each other. So we're really bringing together the face of Kenya. As I said, two students from each county. Students who will not be afraid to speak out. Students who will be very active and proactive as well. And who really embrace the opportunity of being at the M-Pesa Foundation Academy.
What do you expect from education, the ministries and the officials? And if you had a chance to speak to education ministers across Africa, what would you say to them?
Right. Well, let me start with the ministry back home, and they've been really supportive in terms of setting up the academy, as well as the county where we're hosted. And the ministry has been really great in allowing us to say that we do want to add on or perhaps change and modify how we deliver the KCSE curriculum. So to some extent, they've been a very great partner in terms of allowing us to adapt and shape what we want to do. Education for me, and looking forward to your question about the continent, it's really about how do we create students who are both book smart, which I think is important, but really who can compete on the global stage. Yeah? Examination scores are fantastic, but what are those other skills that will make the student who comes from Kenya, from Ghana, from Sierra Leone, from Botswana, competitive with students in the Western world? And I think for some of that, we need to look at the fundamentals above and beyond the curriculum that will make them a world-ready child again. There's elements, as I said, of, what is your research capability? How do you problem solve? What do you do around critical thinking? How aware are you on current affairs and what's going on around the world? For me, those coupled with a solid curriculum, I think deliver that student that we want in Africa for the next 5 years.
Right. So if you had the ministers around you and you could give them words of wisdom, or encourage them in one way or another, because we need to adjust in many ways our curriculums. We need to meet the skills that are required on the market, and there's currently a gap. What would you say to the ministers?
I'd say we need to strike a balance between the academic focus. We need to look at vocational training. We need to look at skills building. We need to look at skills that will put you in a ready work situation and allow you to deliver. So education will no longer be the blend of what you learn within your textbooks, but will also add on other elements: leadership, interactivity, as I said, problem solving, critical thinking, and how do you view the world around you, not just your world at home.
Finally, Sanda, please look into the camera and deliver a message. We wish all the best to the students who will be able to attend the academy, but there's so many other people who are probably thinking, I wish I had an opportunity like this. How can they harness what they have today to make a difference and contribute towards Africa's development, please?
I think that Africa's development will progress when we can all come together and act and take an action. So for all of us out there, it could be political leaders, it could be business leaders, it could be students, it could be workers. We all have a role to play in our own development. And no person is too small or too large to be able to do that. So you know what? Find your part, do your part, and together we'll deliver.
So the M-Pesa Foundation Academy's doors open in January, and it's playing its role in developing this continent. As Sanda has said, nobody's too big or too small to play a role. Thank you so much for joining us.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Hi, I'm Sanda Ojiambo, and you're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
What a fascinating interview. And for me, the takeaway really is that we need to build a generation of critical thinkers and problem solvers. And nobody is too small to contribute. Everybody can play a role. It's amazing. Now to your views on the issues.
This week we asked you, what policies should be put in place to improve the quality of education in Africa? Betty Kwena says, holistic focus starting with early childhood development, which is the foundation for learning.
Hello, my name is Gichuru, and I'm watching ALD from Nairobi. I believe that curricula is the first policy area which African educators should look at. They need to involve employers in its development, so wage policies can reflect skills in the job market rather than credentials.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
Time now for Africa's Top 10.
This week on Africa's Top 10, we feature the countries with the best quality in primary education system. The objective of the research was to ascertain how one would assess the quality of primary schools in their respective countries. This is according to the World Economic Forum. Starting us off at number 10 is Kenya with an index of 3.81 and is ranked at number 79 globally. Coming in at number 9 is Zambia. The Southern African Republic is ranked 77th globally with an index of 3.86. Positioned at number 8 is Tunisia. The North African state attained an index of 3.9 and is ranked at number 72 globally. Taking the number 7 spot is Cape Verde. The island nation is ranked 68th globally with an index of 4.0. Slotted in at number 6 is Lesotho. The enclaved state is ranked at position 66 globally with an index of 4.1. At number 5 is the Gambia with an index of 4.18 and is ranked 63rd globally. Zimbabwe comes in at number 4 with a global ranking at position 54 and an index of 4.3. Taking the number 3 spot is the Kingdom of Swaziland with an index of 4.4 and is ranked 49th globally. Coming in at number 2 is Mauritius. The island nation is ranked at 45th globally with an index of 4.5. And at number 1 this week is the Seychelles with an index of 4.6 and is ranked at position 42 globally. And that's Africa's top 10 this week.
And we close with our African proverb. This one goes, even the biggest cock which crows the loudest was once upon a time just an egg. We can all start somewhere, and with focus and determination, we can grow exponentially. That's the message. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.